Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Earrings Off. We want to invite you to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. You can find us on Facebook at Earrings Off Podcast and on Instagram at The Earrings Off Podcast.
Welcome to Earrings Off. I'm Lou.
And I'm Teresa. Let's get started. Hello again, and welcome to the Earrings Off Podcast, where we have conversations to empower women and the men who celebrate them. I'm Teresa, and in today's episode, Lou and I chat with Yogi Aaron, who is trailblazing a new path in the world of yoga. Known for his unorthodox perspectives on stretching and flexibility and how both cause more harm than good, his teachings aim to help as many people as possible live a pain-free life so they can realize yoga's true intentions. He is an author and the creator of the revolutionary approach to yoga, a yama. Applied Yoga Anatomy plus Muscle Activation. In this interview, Yogi Aaron shares his own healing journey of overcoming pain and discovering and living his true life's purpose. And yes, as we often do during the conversations on this podcast, we manage to laugh a little. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Well, we have with us today Yogi Aaron, who's joined us, and we are excited to have you with us today. So welcome to Earrings Off.
Thank you. My earrings are definitely off.
Well, then there you go. You fit right in. So, Yogi Aaron, tell us, what is your personal experience with chronic pain? Tell us about your journey of healing from chronic pain, because certainly that is something a lot of people are dealing with. It is just rampant. You hear so many stories from people and struggles related to chronic pain. So talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, I started having back problems when I was about 18 years old. And I think, like a lot of people, I had pain, in the lower part of my back and sort of around my hips. Mm-hmm. And it was right around the time I started getting it, ironically, was the time I started really stretching. I got into yoga as a way to stretch because I had very tight muscles. I was a very sport athletic kind of person. Mm-hmm. And so, and I go talk to my teachers and I would say, hey, I've got this pain. And they would use phrases like, well, we need to open those hips. We need to open, your back. We need to open those hamstrings or stretch them out. And I've been doing yoga since then. And I'm very type A when it comes to following directions. Like, you tell me to do something and I do it, and I'm very dedicated about it. Yeah. And the thing is like the pain just kept getting worse, and it was like a ping pong in my body, because I would be okay in my hips, and then my lower back would start to bother me, and then I'd be okay in my lower back, but then my neck. There was actually a good few years that I started to develop this intense neck pain that was right at the base of my neck, and it sort of shoot pain down into the middle of my back and then down into my arm. And it was kind of like someone driving a knife through my shoulder blades. And then it radiated just into my arm. And I saw, acupuncturists, massage therapists, and I remember specifically, my whole energy and being and mental energy was just all going into, managing that part of my life. And it wasn't until this kept going on, and then by about 5 years ago, it sort of culminated when I ended up in a surgeon's office who basically sat me down and said, we might need to do a spinal fusion in your lower back. And so I had a few like herniated discs in my spine that were pressing into like the pain receptors. And that was really, I don't want to say the source of the pain, because it wasn't necessarily the cause of the pain, but it was definitely one of the sources. And that was kind of like a big sort of wake up call for me, but it's, I think sometimes the goal or the path to being a better teacher is like going through experiences yourself.
Yeah.
And that has made me very understanding more of people who, are dealing with different things in their body.
Wow. Well, I have to tell you, Teresa and I, when we heard about you and looked at your website, we were intrigued because we're yogis. And so when we read about you, we were going, okay, well, let's hear about this, because it's just different from what from where we've come from in terms of our practice. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So you had this intense pain and you're facing surgery, right?
Yes.
How did you overcome that?
So I did not have the surgery. What was going on was over the span of a good year, this kind of inflammatory process just became worse and worse. It just became exacerbated over a year, and it just became worse and worse. And so by the time I ended up in the surgeon's office, when I say, I could barely walk. I remember getting out of my car and just having to take like little baby steps into, to see them, because I couldn't walk fast. I just didn't have mobility in my body. Now I have a better understanding of why and what was going on. At that moment, it was really frightening. You can imagine like your ability to walk just starting to become less and less.
Right.
And what they did was, at that moment, was they did what some people get is like an injection into their lower back or into their spine. It's basically like an anti-inflammatory, acute steroid. So that was able to get through that, but that was like a huge like light bulb moment. Like, I have got to change because what I'm doing isn't working clearly.
And when you hear about chronic pain, at least when I hear about it, it seems like the number one complaint people have is the back pain. It's something going on with the back. Yeah.
Right. So
the lower back pain is actually considered, I can't remember if it's lower back pain or just back pain, but back pain is like the number one disability in the world.
Is that right?
Did not know that.
That is a fact, and it's considered a disability. And it's something that plagues, like it's like 1 out of 5 people or something. It's a really high number of people. And I, being a yoga teacher and talking to as many people as I've talked to, I suspect it's actually a little bit higher than that.
Wow. So tell us, how did you come to create your yoga approach? Applied yoga anatomy plus muscle activation.
So coming back to that light bulb moment, was like, that was like when I said to myself, like, there's got to be something else. And I had started to basically go down this path of muscle activation technique. A friend of mine was doing it. I use the friend loosely, but he was a therapeutic person who was using this technique on me. And right after I ended up in the surgeon's office, I actually went to go see him. At that time, he was living in New York City, and I went and did 8 consecutive sessions with him.
Really?
And when so I saw him like every day for 8 days. And during that time, something he did to me, which was another light bulb moment, he basically stretched me. And when I say stretched, it was a very passive, gentle movement. It wasn't anything major. But what happened is he got this muscle strong beforehand, and then he passively stretched me. And then he tested the muscle again after that, and it was weak. And it was like somebody had turned the light switch off in my muscles. I mean, there's no other way to say that. It was like one moment the muscle was strong. It was strong. The next moment there was like nothing. And then he went back and he turned the muscle on again. And again, it was like he turned the light switch off and he turned the light switch on. And it was like bing, 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 bing. So I made the decision to start studying muscle activation technique. As a yoga teacher, I thought I had a good grasp of anatomy. I walked into that course and realized I knew absolutely nothing.
Wow.
It was very humbling, but it was also, one part of me was very excited because I was like learning all of this stuff. And but the other part of me was very sad because I thought to myself, how could I have not understood basic functional, anatomy and understood some very basic ideas of muscle function? As a yoga teacher, one of the things about the MAT world, which was MAT is created by Greg Roscoff, and it's a school in Denver, and he's got like a lot of therapists all over the world, especially all over in the US and Canada. And but one of the things I noticed is that there was nobody there translating this into really sports or translating this into especially yoga. And yoga being my lane, I realized like I had two choices. I could just kind of sneak it in to my classes or start to create a curriculum for my yoga teachers. And so I started to create the curriculum, the Applied Yoga Anatomy and Muscle Activation. Sometimes I call it a YAMA.
YAMA, yeah.
And then I was starting to see that as I was applying this philosophy, and at the top of the list of the philosophy is no stretching. There's a few other points, but it's also bringing in muscle activation practices into yoga, that I was starting to see that after like 6 to 10 days of my trainings, people were becoming pain-free, especially people that were dealing with chronic issues. And it just really surprised me. And then I would sometimes get somebody that would tweak their back or do something, and I would do some things with them, and I would get them to do like some certain ayama practices, and then the pain would go away. And then I would start to see them progressively get stronger. And so I made the decision to start bringing this more on a global scale, or at least start creating some noise about it.
Wow. That is, that's very good stuff, because Teresa and I believe wholeheartedly in holistic healing, that it can happen. Yeah. So natural healing. So what makes your approach to yoga so unique in comparison to other styles of yoga out there today?
Well, so part of the Ayama approach, and I don't want to kind of like get on a soapbox and say like my style is better, or what I'm a traditionalist very much in the yoga world. I really embrace the yoga tradition. And one of the conversations that I'm trying to have, is it's about flipping the script of stretching and flexibility and associating that with yoga, because yoga really doesn't have anything to do with stretching and flexibility. Unfortunately, it's become part of the conversation that people are having. And so, and it's really kind of interesting to me. I don't know if you guys have ever been to a yoga class where the yoga teacher has stood at the front of the class and said, yoga's got nothing to do with flexibility, but then they basically kind of put their foot behind their head, or they fold forward and kiss their knees, And So it's sending a message. It's actually reaffirming, even though what they're saying is one thing, what their actions are doing is reaffirming sort of a message that isn't really congruent with the yoga tradition. And so one of the aspects of the yoga tradition is that we really focus on stability and creating stability. And stability, by the way, is like a huge topic. I mean, we could spend the next 30 podcasts talking about stability, right? So, but stability in yoga means it basically means a couple of things. One, it means like we're pain-free in the body so that we're not having pain. But that pain, the reason why we don't have pain is because we have muscular strength. And if we actually read a lot of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, there's a lot of reference in there to becoming stronger, to becoming more fortified as a yogi so that we could do our spiritual practice. And so there's this idea that we actually need to become stronger. And unfortunately, that gets like, convoluted into different ideas. And we see like, yoga teachers that will do like, 10-minute planks, they'll come in and go 10-minute plank pose, everybody. So how the style is different is that's part of it is stop stretching, start activating, and also kind of flipping that script. It's no longer about flexibility. It's more about how do we engage a muscle? How do we start to get the muscle stronger in the direction that we're moving? So we're doing like a forward fold that we're no longer thinking about stretching the back or the hamstrings, but we're actually talking about, okay, guys, I want you to really work on engaging your core. Let's work on making sure that the thigh muscles, the thigh muscles are able to contract properly.
It's interesting you say that because now as you're talking, I'm thinking about when we do yoga, we traditionally have done hot yoga, Bikram 26 and 2. And but the yoga teacher says throughout the class, this isn't stretching, but it never read because I feel like I'm stretching until you just said that, because I do hear them saying this is not a stretching pose. That's not what we're doing, but it never seems like it's congruent with what my body is doing because it feels like I'm stretching, So yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how does stretching harm the body?
That's a really good question. So this is not, by the way, something that's kind of woo-woo science or pseudoscience. There's been a lot of studies done on athletes who have stretched beforehand, and there's definitely a marked decrease in muscular output, muscular force output. Yeah. So I'll tell you the reason why. There's a couple of reasons why, but one of them is that whenever we stretch a muscle, so your brain is connected to the muscles at a unconscious level, like you're not conscious of that connection. In yoga, of course, we try to improve that mind-body connection, but you're at an unconscious level, the brain is communicating all the time with the muscles. Yeah. So like, for example, if you walked out of your house, it's the first ice of winter and you kind of slip a little bit, what do? You freeze up, you tighten up. So that's a biomechanical response, a protective mechanism by the body, if you will. So when we're stretching, what we're doing is we're bypassing that connection between the brain and the muscle. And then when you stretch a muscle, the brain is connected to that muscle, there's a sense of proprioception. You start to move that muscle beyond what its capacity is. The brain then disconnects from it. That proprioception is no longer there. Another way of thinking about it is in the muscle, you have these little muscle spindles. They're very tiny, by the way, just very, very, very tiny. But muscle spindles are like a new slinky, that you take out of a box. You get a new slinky, and you tell your friend, "Okay, take one end of the slinky and run away as far as you can." And when that friend lets go, what's going to happen to that slinky? It is not going to come back to that coiled state. So that slinky is designed to be in that coiled state. That's what it's designed to do. And that's when it works optimally. And your muscle spindles are the exact same way. So when you stretch them out, they do not come back to their coiled state. It takes a little while. How long it takes depends on your age, depends on how much stress, trauma you've had in your life, or if you've overused your body. So you take a gymnast, for example, who's constantly stressed their body out by stretching and then putting load on their bodies. So over time, it just becomes more and more debilitated. And it's that debilitation that leads someone either to chronic pain or needing surgery to deal with that chronic pain.
Wow.
How does a yama help people eliminate their pain?
Well, because first of all, we're stop stretching. And second of all, we start to address the muscular weakness that's taking place in the body. So let's talk about like the back pain, for example. Why do people suffer from back pain? Well, if we look at the lower back, and I'm not going to list all the muscles, but there are some major muscles that should be working to hold the joints of the spine in place. So muscles have two functions. They move bones and they hold joints in place. So you have the hip joints, you have the knee joints, you have the joints of your spine, and they hold the joints in place by shortening, not by elongating. So one of the objectives then in a yama is to get especially we focus more on the major muscles. I mean, you have a lot of muscles. You have over 600 muscles in the body. So obviously we don't address like all of the muscles, but we address the major ones that are surrounding the spine, and we start to get them activated. And so by activating a muscle, there's a few ways to do it, but one of them is to bring it into a shortened state and hold it there in that shortened state. So create an isometric contraction. An isometric contraction, so if you're going to do like a bicep curl without any weight and just kind of hold it there and flex your bicep as much as you can, that is an isometric contraction.
Well, is that in any way then, Yogi Aaron, akin to like yin or any of that?
No.
No? Okay.
So yin is the complete opposite. Yin is looking to see how much they can lengthen the muscles and lengthen the connective tissue. So we're the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there a healthy way to stretch?
It just depends. How do I answer that? So again, it's just kind of flipping the script in your own mind. Let me give you an example, a couple of examples. But one is like, you talk about stretching the hamstrings. So first of all, why do we want to stretch the hamstrings? Well, because they're tight. One of the most important questions to ask is, why is the muscle tight? And this is a question that you never hear anybody ask, by the way. I've never heard anybody talk about why muscles are tight. So coming back to that analogy of us stepping on the ice, what happens, your body goes into a protective mechanism. It senses instability and it tightens up. The hamstrings are tight as a result of there being instability in the body. So the real thing that I would suggest is not to say, well, is it okay to stretch? It's like, why do we need to stretch? And what is the purpose of that stretching? Well, the purpose of the stretching is to stretch the tight muscles. Well, then better ask, in my opinion, like, why are the muscles tight? Let's address the cause of that tightness. So in the case of the hamstrings, they're tight because the quads are not contracting properly. And so we're looking at doing is looking at the opposite muscle and getting that muscle to contract properly. In this case, it would be the quads. And I have seen people increase the range of motion, like in terms of quote unquote flexibility, if you want to use that word. I've seen people increase their range of motion like 30%, just by activating the opposite muscle properly. It's quite astounding. Right. So from what we're trying to do, Teresa, is really start to activate and engage the muscles that are shortening in any pose. Let me give you one more example. So if you do triangle pose, or, that one pose that Mr. Bikram likes, you come over to the side. I don't remember what it's called. I think it's half moon pose.
Yeah.
And they're always focused on feeling the stretch in the side of the body.
Right.
But actually what we're wanting to do, and I believe some Bikram teachers actually say that, is to feel this. Don't focus on this, but feel the side that you're coming into. Squeeze that side of the body. Squeeze it. Yeah. Because if you squeeze that enough, the other side will just release and let go. It's the law of the muscles. It's the way that muscles function. If I just focus on stretching and not engaging, I'm going to end up creating instability, and instability is always going to create injuries or open up doorway to injuries. Always.
Right. Wow. I can imagine that, you may have made some people angry, because this can be a bit controversial. So is there a safe way then to do yoga? Talk to us about the future of yoga.
I mean, definitely there's a safer way to do yoga. So there's a few kind of key principles I try to impart to people who may not pick up my book quickly or, be around this kind of information. One of them is definitely stop stretching, stop focusing on stretching. Number two, maybe consider just going 30%. Like going into a pose 30%. Why do you need to go 100%? And so then if you ask a person like, why are you going 100%? They'll say, well, because I want to get more flexible, because my flexibility is going to make me happier and healthier. But then the question is, well, how much flexibility do you need to have to be happy? Like where is that end point? So I've just talked to so many people like in the yoga world, and they're like, geez, I wish I could just bring my foot up to my head. And then I talked to another person. They're like, I just wish I could bring my foot past my head. And it's like, that is not natural movement, first of all. Like there's no, like, where are you going to go to the grocery store and reach your foot up behind your head and grab like a box of cookies? I mean, there's no practical.
Well, Aaron, it's a good party trick. You have to spoil everything.
Here's the thing. I'm thinking, well, what am I aspiring to now? You've stolen all of that from me.
Really, Aaron. Yogi.
So, but yes, I know it's all about the showmanship.
Oh, I just love to watch it, and I just envy those who can do it, right?
Yeah.
I want to put my head behind my neck.
So I think like just packing off the practice a little bit, but coming back to what yoga is about, which is the breath.
Right.
And being able to pull our attention inward. And I know you guys were just joking.
Yes.
But the truth is, with all humans, from the age of like somewhere between, I think, 2 and 8, we all learned that happiness was outside of us. And ever since that time, our mind has been chasing that kernel of happiness. And we find that temporary happiness through putting our foot behind our head. I mean, I've done that. Okay? I've done all of that stuff. And I look back at that and I see those pictures of myself and what I was chasing. And I thought, now I'm a yogi because I can do this. But what yoga's teaching us is like all of that is an illusion. And what we want to do is to train ourselves to bring our attention back into the inner kingdom within. And so that's at the source. So if you want to start practicing yama, stop stretching, start activating, only go into postures 30%, work on becoming still. There's so much fidgeting. You walk into people fidgeting and not being content with where they are. Learn to, the big part of yoga practice is becoming content with just where you are and resting in that place.
Yeah.
One of the big teachings of yoga appears in the third sutra, when Patanjali says, when we experience yoga, we become eternally at rest within ourselves. And we look at what Christ said, or what Jesus famously said, turn your attention to your heart, and there you will find your Father. And so all of the great spiritual teachers were teaching the same thing. Bring your attention inward into your heart. If we keep focusing on postures and focusing, Teresa, on bringing your posture head, well, not only will we be chasing an external happiness, but we're also going to lead to damaging our body, which has to carry our spirit through this space in time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly wonderful, wonderful advice. And thank you for sharing that with us. But we want to give you an opportunity, if you have some parting advice for our audience, and please share how they can get in contact with you.
You can go to yogiaaron.com, YOGIAARON. And if you don't remember that, just search Yogi Aaron, stop stretching. You'll find me plastered all over the internet right now. But on my website, I have an opt-in to a 7-day pain-free series. And so it starts to take people on a journey of their body and gives them some real practical muscle activation practices that they can weave into their life. I actually had an email from somebody just recently. I'm not making that up. And she said, I've been in pain for several years, and I saw your thing, and I approached it with a degree of skepticism. But I have to tell you, I'm finally having relief for the first time after, several years of being in chronic pain and seeing massage therapists and seeing acupuncturists and doing that stuff. So I really encourage people to do it. But one of the key things that I want to leave people with is that you have to do it. I was going to give a practice to a friend of mine, literally, actually, just before I came on the show, and he turned to me and he says, I have to be honest with you, I'm not going to do it. And it's like, okay, stay debilitated then.
Right.
You have to do it. Yeah.
But this is good. This is not like taking an aspirin. This practice kind of goes to the root cause of what's going on and will help you to become more stable so that you can thrive in life.
All right.
Nice.
Well, again, thank you so much, Yogi Aaron, for joining us here at Earrings Off. And we know you have shared some wonderful information with our audience. And you've also cautioned me and Teresa to think about ourselves and what we're doing. So thanks again for being here, and we wish you all the best. Take good care.
Thank you so much.